And welcome to another edition of On the Rocks. And we're joined today by one of the more colorful personalities in curling today, Colin Hodgson, the lead for the Mike McEwen team out of Winnipeg. Colin joins us from the bubble in Calgary. How are you doing today, my friend?
Pretty good. I've got my Manitoba coffee ready to go.
All right, very good. So, Colin, can you just give us a sense of what life in the bubble is like? We have heard from curlers in the Scotties and some of the curlers in the Brier, but it's got to be pretty different from what you're used to, especially in life in general and in curling.
Yeah, definitely. There's some pros and cons to it. I'll start with the happy stuff. The pros is that there's a lot more rest and recovery between games. I'm getting more sleep. There's less of the extra little things that we have to do at the events normally. And I like to do the little things, but the schedule isn't really tremendously set up for it. It kind of pumps everything together when you have, two games and then a meet and greet or something in the middle of that. So for performance wise, it's very good. Um, on the negative side to that though, for performance wise, it is definitely difficult to get up to play sometimes, or to feel the emotional happiness sometimes from playing. When you make a great shot, you get that gratification from the crowd, and that they're pleased with what you did, or they're sometimes amazed with what sometimes your skip did, or whatever, and that's gone. So I think on the ice it's a little harder to feel those exciting and happy moments. So that's probably one of the big negatives. And the other one obviously is the testing, the restrictions, the not being able to not being able to go and hang out with your teammates. You have to do it in a specific way in a specific room, or go out on your balconies, and um, some of it's really not that fun. And just trying to find different ways to you know either distract yourself or stay motivated, or I'm doing a ton of work, doing lots of reading, doing some research. So that's been good. I've been uh, very productive throughout the time here, but not in the same way as I would be during a regular Brier with many, with thousands of people in the stands. I miss that aspect. That's my very favorite part of it all, really.
Well, I think I've got it figured out for you. No patch equals more productive during the day, right?
You're right. I'm spending much less time in the patch this time than I normally would.
Well, that is a big part of the Brier and of the Scotties and everything else. There's no doubt about it. The big social aspect. It's obviously pretty different here. Colin, one of the things that we talked about with you in the last couple of years is just how I think you're expressing yourself more in terms of who you are when you're out on the ice, in terms of your look, in terms of tattoos, things like that, visible tattoos when you're playing. Was that a conscious decision, or was that something that you just decided? I just want to be myself.
I think I'm fortunate that my teammates allowed me to be myself and encouraged that. Um, there's good and bad things. It's walking a fine line without being a distraction. That's something I always have to consider. But sometimes it could be a good thing to take the heat off other people as well. Um, but I've kind of realized over the last few years that it's not about, for me, curling isn't about winning. It isn't about being perfect out there. I tried to do that and it almost destroyed me. So I think being able to express myself is the sport. Being able to have fun out there is the aspect I love of it. And if that wasn't there, I don't think I'd be able to continue to do it. Um, so having those moments like Derek and Glenn Howard and I on the ice the other day, Glenn came into the game, he threw lead rocks. He's makes a joke about how easy lead is, and especially when you don't have to sweep. And we're talking, Derek and I are happy, like, well, that would be awesome if we didn't have to sweep too. Um, and just those kinds of moments, or even when Wayne Madog comes back in and lights you up with a great shot. We made an error of where we left the rock, and he made an incredible shot, and we enjoyed that moment, even though or I can look back on that moment fondly, even though it was negative, for the performance aspect of it. And, in the, just saying great shot to him when we get, when we're doing our scan in back at the hotel, said great shot, Wayne. And he said, oh, it was like, yeah, I got lucky that you guys got really unlucky where it's set up.
Yeah.
And just having that kind of mutual respect from somebody like that I grew up wanting to be like I actually slide the way I do because of Wayne, because I realized how good he was and I wanted to be like that. And then to get to play against him later and then have that happen to you, it's like, well, that's really cool. And those kind of unique experiences are what I'll remember at the end of my career, not necessarily winning a game versus wild card 3 on a Monday afternoon or whatever it was.
Well, that's real perspective, Colin. And I think that's really cool. And it's interesting because curling to you is more than just a game, more than just something that you play to try to be a Canadian champion or an Olympian. It's also part of your business. It's part of your life because you are part of Dynasty Curling, which supplies the great jerseys and jackets and hats and everything for the curlers at the Brier and Scotties. How did that all come about, and what does that all mean to you? Like, how much pride is there when you see everybody out there wearing your stuff?
It really started as just I started as a side project, and it wasn't on purpose. I never had sought out to be making sublimated apparel that would be on curlers at the Brier and at the Olympics, at World Championships in multiple countries. Like, that's nothing we ever had dreamed up. I went, I studied culinary and I was a cook, and I love that aspect of work. And it just it really randomly came. I met my business partner and he has a ton of passion. Farron Asham is he's an amazing coach. He's a Hall of Fame baseball coach. He won Indigenous Volunteer of the Decade a few weeks back. So he brought that kind of passion and business expertise, which I didn't have. I didn't have any business expertise. I made a lot of mistakes, and he's kept me from making many more. And we've formed a really good relationship. So I've appreciated that. So for us, the business, or for me, I guess I don't want to entirely speak for him, but for us, the business wasn't just to make a bunch of money. It was to do something that we could connect with people on some level, and to be creating, like, the iconic images on the back of the uniforms that are kind of standard, that people get used to, that they can tie into where they're from. So like Newfoundland Labrador is the Newfoundland dog, and there's just so many cool logos. The Manitoba Bison, so we didn't create that one. That's a very old logo, which is very cool to me, that you can tie previous history in with new modern athletes and youthful ones who are, moving to the future. A good team example would be Team Zacharias at the Scotties. They are a team of the future. They're young, they're world junior champions. They're pushing the boundaries of elite curlers at 22 years old, 21, 22. It's amazing what they're doing. So to be able to tie back into history and show it in a new way, that makes people feel something, that generates conversation. We're trying to have different generations tied to each other, because I think currently we're getting ripped apart by things like social media and technology, and how do we combat that? And that's kind of where I'm coming from, is wanting people to feel something, feel tied to it, because that's the beauty of our sport. You can listen to the athletes. People feel like they know them. They're in your living room, they're in your head if you're listening on headphones while you're watching them play, and you don't get that from other sports. I think that's the uniqueness of it. So to be able to tie in like that is something that's very special to me, and much more impactful, and generates more happiness for me than going out and winning some curling games.
And really interesting to hear you talk about that, Colin, because it sounds like philosophical. It's almost philosophical as opposed to just a business or just a sport. So that really is really interesting. I wanted to ask you about something that comes up a lot on TSN when they're showing the curling, they talk about directional sweeping, and that's a job that leads and seconds obviously do a lot. You're a lead with the Mike McEwen team. Colin, it's still fairly new, this whole concept of directional sweeping. When would you say it shifted to that, and how exactly does it work?
Well, it shifted to that when Broomgate happened,
Right.
when we had when we had very many different broom technologies out there, and teams started to actually really test it and to figure out what they could do and think about it in a different way. So that whole situation was a pretty dark era. There were lots of curlers who just didn't we didn't like each other because of it. It was not the reason I played, and honestly, if we didn't fix that or come to some sort of mutual agreement, I probably wouldn't have continued to play, and I think a lot of other players wouldn't have, because it was an arms race, I believe, and the best technology or the most abrasive technology was what was happening, and people assume people were doing these things on purpose, and that just assumptions are never a good thing. So fortunately, we were able to communicate, work through it. A lot of people were involved, a lot of organizations were involved to try to get back to an area of fairness. And I think we got pretty close. And now what we've accomplished out of that is dumbing the equipment down so much in a way that it's just like golf. It's limiting the distance a ball can go, or it's like baseball, either juicing it or not juicing it, things like that. That's kind of where we're at with our sport. And now I think we found a bit of a sweet spot where physical ability and intelligence of sweeping techniques and styles and communication is coming to a different level. So directional sweeping absolutely, without a doubt, does work. How you do it is everything, though. So finding the proper techniques. I don't quite believe that the science is fully there. And I know there's going to be some people who are upset with me saying that, but I believe there's so many variables in curling. There is slab temperature under the ice, there's humidity, there's evaporation, there's pebble size, there's water temperature when pebble freezes. There are people in the building who are breathing, and if you're closer to the edge of the sheet, there's so many variables that are involved. So as curlers, I think some of the very best sweepers are focusing on the eye test. What works to your eye? Are you making shots? I think that's the more important piece of it than just trying to do it to try to do it. So there are some different concepts out there of how you can directionally sweep, and we've seen them over the last few weeks, and we're going to continue to see them throughout the men's worlds, the women's worlds, the Grand Slams, because there's 2 Grand Slams coming up. The mixed doubles is a big one. We're going to see lots of pivoting, lots of hip placement, lots of getting your body over the broom head for specific reasons. So this is something that I focus on a lot, and I try different techniques, and I watch and try to mimic the guys that I see with my eyes are the best. So I don't think I'm doing anything outlandish. I think I'm trying to put things together that other players I see who are very successful at it, and teams that are successful. And I'm trying to maximize what I can do, because I'm small. I'm not that tall. If I'm, the Harndens are over 6 feet tall and outweigh me by quite a bit, and they're stronger. And I'm just trying to find a way to maximize what I can do as a sweeper.
Well, that's a really good explanation. I just want to just clarify one thing. So if there's 2 sweepers on a rock coming down, and you want to keep it straight, then one person on the one side is going to curl. And if you want it to curl, then the person on the other side is going to curl, or is going to sweep. Is that the proper explanation of it?
That's a pretty correct assumption. I think it's important to watch where the brooms are sweeping. There's different concepts of people are sweeping in front of the rock, starting in the middle, pushing off of it. Are they sweeping half of the stone on one side, half of the stone on the other side? What kind of pressure are they putting? What kind of speed are they putting? Are they mixing pressure with speed? Are they changing their angles steeper or flatter? Why are they all doing these things are questions that I think sweepers should ask themselves and viewers should watch for. It, I believe it's pretty misunderstood right now, and we're still learning too, and we're still testing boundaries as athletes because the equipment has changed. So like what was 5 years ago doesn't necessarily mean it's applicable now, because our brooms are all made of the same material. There's certain certain rolls that they come from, and all the broom heads have to come from that. So we're really dealing with very slight differences in the brooms and technology of them, and it makes it harder or easier to sweep sometimes, different types and styles of brooms. And that's the fun part, is they're all pretty close, but there are slight differences, and it's enjoyable to see what sweepers do with those differences and what they believe in, because the belief process isn't the same across the board, not at the Brier for sure. I don't believe throughout the world championship there's no standard staple way of doing it.
Wow. So it's fair to say that it's a lot more complicated than it used to be. How much would you say it has changed the game? Is it more of a subtle thing, or is it really a massive change?
I think what it's done, and after even discussing with some other athletes, is what it's done is it actually changed the communication aspect. Communication is more important than ever. And I think that's the difference between the game now and what it was. I don't think it's because guys are better at throwing curling shots. I think it's that the communication has to be better because you can alter shots and miss them. Before, you never thought about it that way, that you were going to miss a shot by sweeping unless it was one dimensional, unless you overswept it. But now you can, carve it into a guard, or if you switch, maybe it wouldn't have went as far as if you didn't switch. So there's so many more facets to it. To be successful, you have to have high level communication, and that's what we're seeing. And I believe that's why there's so many great shots now, and so precise, especially when the ice gets very consistent. When the ice changes throughout a game, that's when you're going to see those misses and the interesting ways of carving or not carving or making it straight. But when the ice is consistent, my goodness, you're going to see teams playing 95% against each other, and the difference in the game is one shot or getting lucky sometimes.
Well, Colin, that is really fantastic insight. It's something that I've been very interested in. I'm sure a lot of people who are watching the games on TV are interested to know exactly why that has happened. I tremendously appreciate you sharing that information with us. I appreciate you very much being here with us today. And best of luck with the rest of the Brier. For Colin Hodgson, I'm Ted Wyman. You've been watching On the Rocks.